Okay, I believe I'm live. Decided to start this a little earlier than planned, so might not have as many people in here to start. But I'm gonna wait a couple minutes to get some questions rolling in, and we'll get going. Thanks to people that have been in here in the past that are dropping in again, and thanks to people who are trying this out for the first time. So there's a live chat function off to the right. If you've got a question, ask it, and I will get to it. Anything that's not completely ridiculous, I will answer. So thank you. Hope everyone's had a good Thanksgiving weekend so far. Had a good Thanksgiving yesterday. A couple housekeeping things. I posted a Black Friday offer newsletter on Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you can get the Black Friday offer. It's www.substack or sorry, scottbell.substack.com/Black Friday, and it is 25% off the annual rate for a premium subscription. And I think that's about it, housekeeping wise. For the sake of the YouTube channel, if you're not subscribed, it's super helpful. If you do subscribe to the channel, it makes videos appear more frequently. Same for liking it too. So if you can take a quick second to throw a like on this and subscribe to the channel, that is super helpful. But I got a couple questions rolling in, so let's get going. Luke asks, don't know if you've already answered this somewhere, but what would your answers be for the 3 Brown, Gaddis, Harbaugh polls you posted? So anyone that follows me on Twitter a couple times over the course of the season so far, I've basically asked people where they stand on Harbaugh, Brown, and Gaddis's future. I can actually quick look up to see what the exact wording is, but it's basically, do you want to cut ties right away? Do you think they're the long-term answer, or do you want to wait and reevaluate in the offseason? The easiest decision is Brown. I don't think there's a conceivable argument to make to keep him on the staff after this year. I've mentioned multiple times in my writing, I think his legacy in Ann Arbor is going to be a little unfair because I think he got crapped on before things turned south, and I think Michigan had an elite defense for the majority of his tenure here. But the fact of the matter is, for as bad as things have gone south this year, and for as quickly as they have, I just don't think you can justify keeping him around. So I do think you cut ties with Don Brown at the end of the year. I don't think you do it in the middle of the year. I don't think there's anything that can be gained by firing him between now and the end of the Ohio State game. The defensive room is already shorthanded. Bob Shoop's not there in person, and if you cut that room even more, if you have left with 60% of the defensive coaches you had at the start of the year, it's not fair to the kids, it's not fair to the learning, and you're basically firing someone for the sake of firing. So short term, I think you keep him for 3 more weeks, but long term, you just have to move on. And that's, if you think Harbaugh's here next year, I think you keep him here under the ultimatum. And you probably don't use the word ultimatum with Jim Harbaugh, but under the understanding that you absolutely have to make a change on defense. The charts I posted earlier in the week about where Michigan's defense was statistically in terms of points per game and yardage per game. Yardage per game, Michigan has been a top 6 defense, I think it was, for each of his first 4 years on campus, and they're like 92nd now. And from a scoring defense standpoint, they've always been top 20, and they're not even in the top 100 this season. So it's just incredible how quickly that's fallen. So I think you move on from Don Brown, and Gaddis and Harbaugh are a little bit more of a package deal to me. This season is his contract, because I would be more likely to be like, yeah, just let's give him 1 more year. He completely turned Michigan around, and this year isn't going well, but they're still In terms of program health, still probably a number two or a 2, 3, 4, just right in that second tier. Big Ten program, and that's better than what he came in here. And you can chalk this season up to some COVID issues, injuries, attrition, people opting out. I mean, you have you have Mayfield, you have Pay, you have Hutchinson, all injured badly. Well, I add McGrone in there now. Hayes, you've got Ambry Thomas and Nico Collins opting out. You've got Dylan McCaffrey transferring. There's a lot of things that have happened. There's COVID. Obviously, everyone's dealing with COVID, but you can basically make the argument that okay, this season is an anomaly. But the problem with Harbaugh is you really can't because of what his contract situation is, and the fact that next year is his last contract under Michigan. You absolutely cannot go into next season with him being on his last contract year. So in a typical situation, I would say I would be much more open to say, let's just go into next year and wait. But that is just not a viable option this year. So the two choices with Harbaugh are you either part ways with him or you extend him. And the more they play like they're playing right now, the harder it is to justify giving him an extension. Now, um, I don't think it helps that neither Harbaugh or Ward Manuel have been particularly proactive, at least based on the reporting we've heard about getting that extension. But it's kind of going to be a PR nightmare if Ward Manuel is extending Jim Harbaugh. And well, I think an extension, a sort of a moderate, modest extension might make sense. I don't really know if that's in Jim Harbaugh's personality to take a couple year shorter term extension that might mitigate some of the buyout issues on both sides and maybe lead to a pay cut. And I'm just not sure if some ego would get in the way. So with that in mind, I'm leaning more toward going a different direction in the off season, but it's just still so weird to me to sort of envision how that's going to play out. So I'm not speaking in definitives when it comes to the head coaching spot because a lot of things can change in the next 3 weeks. But if you had a gun to my head right now, I just can't see a scenario where it would make sense and both sides would be cool with an extension this offseason. So because of that, I would lean toward Michigan having a different head coach next year. And Gaddis, I thought he would be a sure thing to be back next year going into the season. But going into the season, I thought Harbaugh would be back too. I'm not very impressed with how the offense has been called this year. I thought things got a little better against Rutgers, but it was also Rutgers, so I think that has to be taken with a grain of salt. So I think Gaddis's future hinges pretty much on who's back next year. If Harbaugh's back, I think you can keep Gaddis and try and build on that because I think the biggest problem with this year's team is the defense, and it's hard to just do a full scale rebuild on both sides of the ball. But if you bring in a different coach, that coach is probably going to have preferences on the type of offense he runs, the type of coach he has familiarity with, and it's hard to know what direction they would go. Like if Matt Campbell's the real sexy name right now, if Matt Campbell comes in, Tom Manning's his right hand man on offense. There's a chance Iowa State would offer him the head coaching job. But if you look at Matt Campbell's history with assistants, he's very particular in working with people that he's worked with in the past. I'm working on a longer Matt Campbell piece that's going to come out in my newsletter in the next couple of days. Keep an eye on that, doing a lot of research into his past or whatever, and there's a very clear pattern with his coaching. So it's hard to pencil in Gaddis back next year when you don't know who the head coach is going to be. But I would say the vast majority of head coaches are going to already have an offensive coordinator in mind in who they'd want to bring in. So you could see a scenario where you're breaking in or you're losing all three of those coaches. I think the most I think you're either going to have 2 back, which would be Harbaugh and Gaddis, or you're going to have 0 back. But I think in either scenario, Don Brown's definitely gone. So sorry for that very long-winded answer, but that hope that answers your question. Brad asks, who would be a good realistic replacement for Don Brown? Same caveats of what I was just talking about kind of applies there. If it's Harbaugh, that's still coach next year. I think you can maybe narrow down some of those choices a little better than if you're bringing in another coach, because a lot of these coaches may have someone in mind as their defensive coordinator. I wrote a piece on my newsletter last week about some candidates that that have impressed me this year, not necessarily people specifically with Michigan ties, but just defenses that I thought have looked really good. And I kind of gauged the likelihood or what their interests might be. Obviously, you got Wisconsin and Northwestern's defenses have both been good this year, but neither of the defensive coordinators make a lot of sense. I think Wisconsin's defensive coordinator's next move is to a head coaching job. I don't think he'd take a lateral move, especially inside the Big Ten. And Northwestern's defensive coordinator is going to be 73 years old by the end of the season. So I don't think that's makes a lot of sense either. Some names I like. Jim Leavitt at Florida Atlantic, I think, would be a slam dunk choice that would make a lot of sense most years. He's actually worked under Harbaugh in San Francisco, and he has a good reputation, at least from an X's and O's coaching standpoint. Obviously, he left South Florida as their head coach in not so great circumstances, accusations of him hitting a player, but he's kind of landed on his feet in the decade or so that has passed. The biggest issue there is Leavitt is working under Willie Taggart at Florida Atlantic, and Willie Taggart is a very close friend of Jim Harbaugh's. And I just don't know how that would go, the optics of sort of hiring someone away from a close friend, even though that would be a step up. So if that was a thing that could be resolved, I could see that being a really good choice. Marcus Freeman at Cincinnati makes a lot of sense. A lot of people think he might be a package deal with Luke Fickell, though. I've made my thoughts known on that. I don't like Luke Fickell as a quarterback or as a coaching candidate if Michigan parts ways with Harbaugh. But Marcus Freeman, Cincinnati's defense is good. Michigan State made a run at him in the offseason, and they weren't able to get him. So just a couple names. I'm not going to go through my whole newsletter because I spend a lot of time on that, and I like making things available to subscribers. But that's kind of a couple names to keep in mind there. Justin says, if Harbaugh is not at Michigan after this year, you think Mario Cristobal would be a good option if he would take it? Yeah, I think that's a pretty popular name that has continued popping up. And when I made my initial candidate list, he was not on there, not someone I really had in mind because I didn't really think he would be a viable candidate. But as others have pointed out, I think he's making like $2.6 million a year at a good program. He can recruit, which I think is definitely a direction to consider taking things if you're Michigan. Michigan doesn't have a whole lot of really dug-in ties to specific areas, and I think if you go the Cristobal route, you could really try to win an area, whether it's the West Coast or something that's made Ohio State super has led to their resurgence under Urban Meyer and now Ryan Day is they've turned Texas into their recruiting pipeline, which is insane when you think about it. But they've pulled more 5-stars out of Texas than any other school in the last like 5 years or something. And living here in Texas, it's insane to think because of the Longhorn and Aggie brands and presence here. But that's what's happened. So if Michigan wanted to go the Cristobal route, I think it could be interesting. There's always the thought that even if Michigan can offer him double his salary, Oregon's got Phil Knight, and they could probably do the same. So I'm not sure if he would go, but He's probably the candidate that I didn't initially list that probably is the most kind of combination of realistic and intriguing to go after my sort of first tier of candidates. So I could see something like that. Um, Sam B, any idea what happened with Dylan McCaffrey? I'm not privy to anything that hasn't already been reported and rumored, and I don't really want to touch on a lot of rumors. So I don't know if it's if a lot of what's rumored took place, or if it's just a case of Joe Milton really did beat him out. But it seems like those rumors pop up when Joe Milton starts playing poorly. So it seems almost like a little too good to be true and conspiracy theory or whatever. But I'm not privy to anything beyond what's being reported. Uh, Shane Miller, looks like we got a Michigan State troll in here. So congratulations on spending your Friday night that way. Harbaugh 21 Ziff says, so you want to scrap proven good coaches in JJ for a roll of the dice on a coach who has never coached at this level. I do not know who or what that's in reference to, so I don't know how to respond to that. Talking about JJ McCarthy, I think you should have, I think recruits and the future talent of your program should be weighed into your into decisions, but I don't think it should be driving a driving factor. So it would be great to have JJ McCarthy here, a bona fide 5-star quarterback, but you also don't make the decision on who you bring in to run your program. You don't let a recruit sort of hold that hostage. So if you think this is time to move on, and if you like the coach that you think gives you the best chance of moving forward, one player in one class, or even one a good chunk of one recruiting class, I don't think should weigh that decision. And if it does, then maybe that in itself is a sign that the coaching candidate you've zeroed in on is as good of a candidate as you think so. Justin Eddy says Campbell has very little assistant coaching turnover. I think like half of his current staff was with him at Toledo back in 2015, including both coordinators. Yeah, like I alluded to, I'm working on a Campbell piece, and his coaching staff and sort of that loyalty is a big element of that. So I think Michigan fans can look at this as both positive or negative. I think I could see a scenario where Michigan hires Matt Campbell and then fans are just up in arms when 6 or 7 of the 10 coaches he brings over here are going to be coaches who are at Iowa State and who are just going to get large raises. Like, he's going to have a bigger assistant coaching pool. Something you saw with Mel Tucker coming from Colorado to Michigan State is Michigan State fans were really excited that Mel Tucker was going to have this huge assistant coaching pool, but a huge chunk of his staff he brought over was his staff from Colorado, and he just paid them more. And needless to say, I sat here and laughed and made fun of it. But you look at what that transition could be if Matt Campbell came to Michigan, and I think it would be pretty similar, because he has shown loyalty is a huge thing to him. Continuity is a huge thing, and I think that's important for teams. But I think fans who want these assistants who are going to make big recruiting splashes, which I do think Matt Campbell is going to need, if or a coach of Matt Campbell's ilk would need to come here, because recruiting at Michigan and recruiting at Iowa State are very different things. But I do think that continuity would be good in terms of everyone being on the same page, not having conflicts, everyone kind of preaching the same message. And one of the things about Jim Harbaugh's staffs is he's been able to make a lot of big hires, but there's also been a ton of turnover. And some of that is coaches doing a good job and rising to the ranks, getting head coaching jobs or getting coordinator jobs, and that's great. That's a good scenario to lose people in. But other times there's just, hey, this offseason you've lost 4 or 5 coaches, and Michigan has the resources to bring in other coaches, and the assistants Michigan has brought in has been good. But you look at some of these players, and they've had 4 coordinators in 4 years or 3 coordinators in 4 years, and it's just really hard to really zero in on a message, on concepts, on things like that. So a staff that's been together for a long time, I think, can be a really big asset inside Schembechler, even though some of these names might not be as sexy as a lot of Michigan fans would hope for. Wow, Michigan State guy is really going nuts in here. He might need to make some friends. Brendan the Bean says, do you think JJ will get any playing time as a true freshman, or will he be redshirted? I hate to answer everything by prefacing it by saying it depends, but I think it depends on who's the coach, who's still here. If Cade's going to be the guy, does that run off Joe Milton? If it does, then I think there's a good chance you give JJ McCarthy some backup minutes, get him some playing time. I would be surprised if he's starting as a true freshman, but I do think there can be benefits to getting him time. I am certainly, especially when it comes to 5-star people, I'm not an advocate of, hey, we need to redshirt him so he can start as many years as possible, because these 5-stars that are coming in, I think you need to think, hey, they're going to be here for 3 years regardless. If you redshirt him 1 year and then you play him the next 2, he can still leave as a redshirt sophomore. It's sort of the Jabril Peppers school of thought. So I think that clock is ticking the minute that you step foot on campus, and I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit in waiting to get them time on the field. So the most important thing next year needs to be winning games, and if he's not ready to get in, then the quarterback who's most ready, you let him play. But I think there is a lot of benefit to getting someone like JJ McCarthy some reps sooner rather than later. And I think people clamor to save red shirts way too frequently in this day and age. Put Don Brown's resume up against any of these clowns. I think he's talking about the defensive coordinators I was mentioning. We've got some people that are mad online today. Zach Arnett, Mississippi State. Yeah, I like Mississippi State. I was kind of looking into them because I mentioned them in my picks column today, and it's weird that you have the Mike Leach offense, and everyone's so excited that air raid in this first game against LSU, they've been great, but their offense really hasn't worked in the SEC, and it's interesting to see some of these schools with a big offensive identity relying more on their defense. So yeah, I think there are a lot of good young names, and he would be one of them. Xavier Worthy at Bama today. What are the odds we keep him? Most of the local recruiting experts are saying all the right things, but the fact of the matter is, this is a guy that's paying his own way to go see a game in Alabama. So I'm not of the school of thought that this is not a big deal. I think it is wide receivers in this class, but I'm not surprised he's looking around. Just there's uncertainty, even if it's just coming up with a plan B. I think it's important. I would do that if I was a recruit. But I think going to Alabama also shows his confidence, and I think that's something to have in a player. And if you think you can step in and play, regardless of who else is in that class, regardless of who's in that depth chart, that's the confidence of someone you want in your class. So if he lands at Michigan, I think he's going to be a really special guy. But I think there's a decent chance he doesn't. And with everything that's happening on and off the field this year in Ann Arbor, I don't think you can really blame him. Got to go through some of the crap here. Campbell seems like he would be a force in Ohio as far as recruiting, at least make Ohio State work a little harder. Yes. So I have said that there have been a lot of people that have been critical that Michigan hasn't really recruited Ohio lately. And I think that's a little unfair, because my thought is Ohio State's Ohio State is recruiting pretty nationally, but before they do that, they can have the pick of whatever Ohio kids they want. So you're not going to get the elite people from Ohio. And then, yes, you don't have Mark D'Antonio going into Ohio, that was a big focus of them. But if you look at what Luke Fickell has done, Cincinnati, they're really scooping up a lot of those second tier Ohio people. So do you really want to get in a battle with your coaching staff as it made up, who don't have a ton of ties to Ohio, and get in some battles with Cincinnati that you might not win? I think that could be a pretty big perception hit. So I get why Michigan has not made Ohio a priority. And I know traditionally they have, but with the makeup of this staff, I get that. But I do think Michigan as a program going back into Ohio would be a good thing if you're doing it because you have someone like Matt Campbell or some assistants that have these deep ties in Ohio where you can be successful. I don't really important for Ohio or for sort of this program's local recruiting approach. And I think having as many people on this roster that understand the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry would be good because I don't like talking about who cares more because that's not really something that's measurable, but it just seems like it's a bigger deal at Ohio State than Michigan. And that is something that would be great if it could turn around. Do I think the 2021 class will keep Harbaugh's job more secured going forward? Honestly, I think a lot of what you're hearing from 2022 people might be more of an asset for Jim Harbaugh than just the 2021, because it sounds like that 2021 class is pretty tight regardless. And I'm blown away by their maturity and a lot of what they say, but seems like these guys have committed to Michigan the school, not Michigan the coach, or Michigan the what they expect to see on field here. And they're at least saying all the right things, and it's really impressive to see 18 and 19-year-olds speaking that way. I still have the caveat, like earlier, I don't think you should be making decisions on coaches based on recruits. But if you are letting that influence decisions, you look at some of these 2022 specifically secondary guys, and if they're basically saying they want to come play for Harbaugh, I don't think you let them hold you hostage. But again, if you're looking for reasons to keep Harbaugh, that 2022 class of highly touted 5-star, high 4-star recruits in the defensive secondary is a one of the better points you can make in the keep Harbaugh category. Milton looked awesome in his first game, then declined. Do you think McNamara will do the same or continue to play well for the rest of the season? Yeah, I think. Well, not necessarily the same thing, but I am worried that McNamara has set the bar so high that it's going to be hard to reach that. And part of that is you're playing Rutgers and you're playing garbage minutes against Wisconsin, where it's not the normal Wisconsin defense. But I'm worried that fans are going to expect too much too quick from McNamara. So I think he's going to be a pretty solid quarterback, and I'm hoping that Michigan is going to have a similar game plan like they did in Rutgers, where you're not going to ask him to do too much. But especially knowing this fan base, I think there are going to be times where he's not going to be super sharp, and the instinct of a lot of people is just to immediately jump on him. And you're going to see 4 touchdown, 0 interception lines a lot this game from basically any Big Ten quarterback not named Justin Fields. And it's unfortunate that McNamara will be held to that standard. But I think he's going to be solid throughout the majority of the rest of the season, but I don't think he's going to be Rutgers McNamara, because if you have Rutgers McNamara, all of a sudden you're looking at a Michigan team that might win the rest of its games. Well, say for Ohio State, probably. I came in late. We ever discussed how Dan Mullen only ever won 8 to 9 games at Mississippi State, so of course he can't win more at Florida. Oh wait, I think that's a great example. Again, I'm going to have a lot more to say about Matt Campbell, write about Matt Campbell in the coming days. For people that have come in late, reminder that I have a Black Friday special for my newsletter. If you're not already a subscriber, that lasts through tomorrow. But yeah, I think people that simplistically look at records at places that are traditionally hard to win at um, are either being purposely dense or just don't understand how hard it is to win at some of these places. And I think Dan Mullen is a perfect example of that step up you'd look at someone like Matt Campbell making. Interested to see how the running game opens up with McNamara under center. Seems like he throws some linebackers who had to respect his passing in the RPO. We will see tomorrow. Yep, not much of a question, but it's a statement I completely agree with. I think you saw it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. What's making who successful, but as long as one is leaning into the other, I think it's a great problem for the offense to have. Yeah, either way. And it was great to see Michigan's running game sort of open back up in the second half of that Rutgers game because it was full on gone for 5 straight halves of football. Safe to say the Sean Nua hire was a bust. Bust is a tough word to use, but specifically with defensive tackles, I mean, recruiting, Michigan hasn't brought in a bona fide defensive tackle recruit in a couple, like hadn't had a commitment or a signing in like a couple of years, which is pretty insane. So I don't think that all falls on Nua because I think a lot of the struggles happening with this current team predates his time here, and it goes back to the struggles in the 2017 signing class specifically, where Michigan put a lot of eggs in defensive tackles that just didn't pan out, and then in subsequent classes they didn't really bring in as big of numbers. So Sean Nua has kind of been asked to do a lot without a ton of talent, and that's not necessarily fair to him. But from a recruiting standpoint, I think any Michigan fan can and should be disappointed with specifically interior defensive line recruiting in the last couple of classes. In the defense, is the defense more of a scheme problem or a talent problem or all of the above? It's both. Um, I think it's a little more scheme than talent, mainly because my default is not to kind of shit on 19 and 22-year-old kids. Clearly, they are they're not as talented this season as they have been in past years. Part of that is attrition, part of that is injuries, but part of that is how the staff is recruited too. So if I can group recruiting and scheme in together as a coaching thing, then that's my answer. Because if Don Brown and his staff knew it was going to insist on keeping playing with this scheme, which I think there have been a lot of warning signs that it's already antiquated in past years, you have to recruit defensive backs that have speed and have a particular skill set. And they just haven't been doing that. And whether it's they've been trying to and they haven't been successful, or it's just faulty recruiting, you need to understand if you don't have that personnel that you can't be running that scheme. And I put that on the coaches. So I put more of the blame on the coaches than the players. Favorite college football atmosphere you've been to, not counting Michigan. Even if it was counting Michigan, Michigan would not be up there. I love Michigan. The Big House is a cool experience, but it's in terms of an environment, it's probably not top 5 from where I've been. Best place I've ever been, I went to an LSU Alabama night game back when they were both top 10 teams, and it was incredible. It's going to be hard to ever top that. I've been to Michigan, Ohio State, and Columbus when it was number 1 versus number 2. That was incredible too, even though it was such a weird atmosphere that weekend in particular, because that's Bo Schembechler died the day before that game. I've also been to night games in Penn State, night games in Kinnick. Both very cool experiences there too. So those are probably my biggies. And each year I cover Texas OU. It's part of my job down here in Dallas, running the sports section for the Dallas Morning News. And even though it's always a day game, there's not necessarily as raucous of that night experience or whatever. It's just such a unique game because it's the stadium literally splits like orange and red, and it's half Texas fans, half Texas OU game or fans, and it's just a really truly unique experience that anyone I would recommend experiencing it, even if you don't have any ties to either team, which I don't. If Matt, sorry, I'm sorry if someone was sarcastic about something and I missed it. I'm just trying to go down and get as many of these questions as possible. So if I'm missing any context with previous things, I apologize. I'm just trying to tackle as much of these as possible, and it's almost time to put my kid to bed. So quick warning on that I'm almost wrapping this up. If McNamara had started all season, what is your best guess at a record? Are we the same because of the defense? I would say 3-2. I'd like to think that you win that Michigan State game, but maybe that's just me in denial as to how things went. Because a lot of that trouble was still Michigan's defense and not Michigan's offense. But I just Joe Milton was not sharp whatsoever in that game, and it was close. It says, assuming Harbs is here in 2021, you think he dips into the transfer portal more, could use cornerback and defense tackle? Seems the transfer portal has taketh more than it has giveth to Michigan outside of Shea. Completely agree with that. And yes, I will say if Michigan doesn't tackle the transfer portal, particularly after this season, I think it's an indictment of the program and of the staff. I say, especially because of this season, both based on how many deficiencies became clear that are on this roster and how much there is to fix, but also this year is going to be unique because of COVID, because of the free transfer everywhere, and I think it's going to be even more a case of free agency. So you already saw Michigan grab that one-time LSU offensive lineman at the start of the year. That's great, getting some depth there, but specifically on defense, you have to raid the transfer portal and raid other rosters. If there's coaching changes and there's players that are up in the air, you poach there. You just have to be aggressive, and this is a chance for a program with Michigan's resources to sort of outmuscle maybe some smaller programs that would otherwise be more aggressive in the transfer market. You look at a program down here like SMU, they just have that they couldn't recruit with the big boys here, so they just tried to zag when other people zigged. And if SMU can do that, if programs like that can do it, then Michigan needs to do that. So got a couple other questions coming in. I'm sorry, I'll do another one of these next week, but I do have a kid to put down. And we did do 40 minutes, so really appreciate everyone that came here. Again, final reminder, it's super helpful if you like these videos to help the channel grow. If I'm going to keep doing these, I want to do them for as many people as possible. So if you can like the video, if you can subscribe to the channel, super helpful. And final reminder that I have a Black Friday special for my newsletter, which is live through tomorrow. It is 25% off an annual premium subscription. So if you got any questions about that, shoot me a note on Twitter, email, whatever is convenient to you. But thank you everyone that participated in this, and let's watch some football tomorrow, and hopefully we can see back-to-back Michigan wins. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and we will talk to you later.